The planet Luria was well known across the galaxy for its strict culture and powerful royal family. The Lurians stood tall with bright scales on their skin, and many star systems respected their rules. They often spoke with pride and sometimes arrogance. Human visitors knew that this world demanded perfect manners. Only the bravest soldiers accepted missions here, because the royal family had a reputation for judging outsiders very harshly. Human alliance representatives arrived to discuss peace and military cooperation. After many years of border conflicts, both sides finally agreed to talk. Among the humans sent to the palace was a 32-year-old soldier named Mark. Mark had a calm face and a steady voice. He did not speak much, and he followed orders without complaint. His friends often said he had the heart of stone and a mind like a focused blade. He did not show anger or fear easily. Mark wore silver armor that made him look taller and stronger. The armor was not only a symbol of rank, but also a reminder of the battles he had survived. Each plate carried scratches, showing his experience. When he walked inside the palace, his boots echoed off the marble floor. Many Lurians watched him with curious eyes, whispering quietly from the corners of the hallway. Princess Mira, the daughter of the Lurian king, stood waiting inside the throne hall. She was 33 years old, respected by her people, and famous for her sharp words. She had long, dark hair with silver ornaments woven into thin braids. Her bright purple eyes showed intelligence, and her posture made her seem taller than she was. Mira believed that only those who proved their worth should stand before her. In her view, humans were far less disciplined than her race. Guards formed a line along the walls. Their armor gleamed like polished glass. The king sat on a high throne carved from black crystal, giving him a serious appearance. The advisors gathered near him, whispering about trade routes and patrols. The atmosphere was heavy. Everyone moved carefully, trying not to break the silence. When Mark entered the throne hall, he looked straight ahead with respect. He did not bow too deeply, but the bow he gave was polite. The king watched him without reaction, studying the human's calm expression. Princess Mira narrowed her eyes. She had already heard rumors that Mark was proud, and she wanted to see how far that pride would go. "Welcome, soldier of Earth," the king said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "We called this meeting to discuss a united defense plan. Pirates have been attacking our borders, and we believe a joint military effort might protect both sides." Mark nodded calmly. "I am honored to listen and serve as a representative of my commanders," he answered in clear voice. Princess Mira stepped forward. "Your armor looks worn," she said. "Do all humans arrive looking like they just walked out of a scrapyard? Or is this some kind of human fashion trend?" Several court members chuckled quietly. Mark remained still. He did not react. He did not even blink. Mira looked slightly annoyed at his silence. She expected anger. She expected him to defend himself. Instead, Mark only stood quietly. "So," she continued, speaking with a bored tone, "a human soldier is meant to help us. Can you lift more than a single crate of supplies, or do humans depend on machines to carry their weakness?" More whispers filled the throne chamber. Some guards looked away, uncomfortable with the princess's attitude. Mark finally replied, but his voice stayed calm. "I came to help build peace and defense," he said. "I did not come to exchange insults." Princess Mira raised an eyebrow. "You claim to help, yet you stand here dressed like a broken metal statue. I wonder if humans choose their soldiers based on luck instead of skill." Mark turned slightly. He looked directly at the king, not the princess. "I came here with respect," he said slowly. "But if my presence is only meant to be mocked, then perhaps I should not be here at all." The court went silent. No one expected a human to speak so directly. Guards shifted their feet, shocked by his courage. Princess Mira laughed softly, not in joy but in disbelief. Walking away from difficulty proves nothing. Weakness hides in silence. Mark closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, there was calm focus in his gaze. Without another word, he stepped forward, reached up to his chest, and unlatched the first piece of his armor. The metal plate clanged against the polished floor. People gasped. He removed the second plate, then the third. Each piece landed with a loud echo. Mark spoke with a steady tone. "I do not need armor or rank to hold my honor," he said to the court. "If I am not valued here, I would rather walk without the weight of pride." Princess Mira froze. She expected anger, not quiet strength. She expected loud shouting, not controlled confidence. Mark continued removing armor until he stood only in simple clothing. The final piece fell, and the deep echo carried across the room like thunder. Your armor is nothing without the person wearing it, he said softly, and I do not need yours to be who I am. The king leaned forward. His eyes showed surprise and interest. Many advisors whispered to each other, unsure how to react. The guards stared, impressed by the human's courage. Princess Mira felt something she never felt before. She felt confused. Her world believed strength should be loud. They believed loud talk proved power. But this soldier showed more power in silence than many warriors did in battle. You leave already? Mira asked, trying to sound bored, but her voice cracked slightly. I leave when I am not welcomed, Mark replied. He gave a respectful bow to the king. Thank you for the opportunity, but I will not stay where my purpose is insulted. He turned and began walking toward the exit. Each step echoed. He walked with no hurry, no fear. He did not look back. Whispers grew louder as he passed. Some aliens looked impressed. Some looked confused. Others looked ashamed. A few guards lowered their heads in respect as he moved past them. When Mark reached the palace door, a young guard tried to speak. Sir, maybe you should stay. The princess only tests people. She does it to everyone. Mark shook his head. Respect should not be a game. He stepped outside, where warm wind blew across the palace courtyard. The sky was bright blue and the sun reflected off the sand dunes beyond the palace walls. Inside, Princess Mira stood still, her pride shaking. She had never seen someone show dignity by walking away. She felt a small sting of regret. She wanted to call out, but she did not know what words to use. The king spoke softly to her. You judged him too quickly, he said. Humans are not like us. They hold strength quietly. Maybe you should have listened. Mira clenched her hands. She tried to ignore the uneasy feeling growing in her chest. Sometimes silence is a stronger weapon, the king added. Advisors started talking about how humans might be more disciplined than they thought. Whispered respect replaced earlier laughter. Mark walked farther across the courtyard. He reached the gate where two guards stepped aside. They did not block him, showing silent respect. Beyond the gate, a wide desert stretched to the horizon. The wind stirred the sand gently. He paused only once and looked back at the palace towers. He felt no anger, only calm. Then he continued forward. Inside the palace, Princess Mira stepped onto her balcony, watching the distant figure walking into the open desert. Her eyes narrowed, not with anger, but curiosity. She wondered why walking away hurt more than any insult thrown back. She touched the railing lightly. Her heart beat faster than usual. Something about this human did not fit her beliefs. For the first time in many years, Mira felt unsure, and deep in her heart, she knew her story with the quiet human soldier had not ended. As the sun lowered in the sky, the heat spread across the golden desert outside the palace. Mark walked forward slowly, leaving deep footprints behind him. With each step, he felt the heat through the thin soles of his boots. The wind pushed sand against his legs, but he did not stop. He chose silence, even though he had many thoughts moving quietly inside his mind. He looked back once, seeing the palace walls shining under the hot sun, then turned away again. The smell of dry dust filled the air, and the sky stretched endlessly over the flat land. The desert was dangerous for anyone without water or protection, but Mark had traveled harsher places in his career. He knew how to survive. His training taught him patience, observation, and calm thinking. Inside the palace walls, Princess Mira stood on her balcony, watching his far figure grow smaller. She felt confused. A soldier walking into a desert alone without armor seemed foolish to her culture. Lurin warriors would never abandon their armor. They believed armor was identity. Armor proved their worth. Seeing Mark remove his armor so calmly broke something inside Mira's beliefs. It showed that his strength was different. The king entered the balcony quietly. He stood beside his daughter, folding his hands behind his back. He did not look at her at first. He only watched the desert. You pushed him too far, the king said. His voice did not sound angry. It sounded disappointed. Mira looked away from the desert. I tested him, father. I wanted to see his limit. Testing a guest is not wisdom, the king replied, especially a guest of another species. Humans respect dignity like we respect honor. When you insult their dignity, they respond in unusual ways. Mira lowered her head slightly. It was not common for her to feel shame, but the emotion appeared there in her eyes. But he walked away, she said quietly. If he had true strength, why did he not stand and argue against me? The king finally looked at her. Because strength is not always loud. Sometimes the strongest warriors are those who can leave a situation without losing themselves. His words stayed in her mind. She crossed her arms and stepped away from the railing. She did not want to show her confusion, but she could not hide it. She kept replaying the moment when Mark removed his armor. Each clang of metal echoed inside her memory like a drum. Outside, Mark found a small rocky hill in the desert and sat down. He pulled a small water bottle from his belt. He only took one sip, knowing he had to save every drop. He searched the horizon, looking for signs of movement. A desert at night could become colder than ice. He would need shelter when the sun disappeared. As the day passed, advisors inside the palace started debating. Some believed Mark would return soon with regret. Others believed he would die in the desert. A few wiser ones thought the princess had made a mistake. They warned that insulting an ambassador from a strong human alliance might cause political problems. They argued among themselves in the war chamber. Maps lay across the long table, showing pirate attacks and trade routes. Negotiations that should have moved forward now slowed because of a simple insult. The guards outside the meeting chamber whispered to each other, wondering if the princess would leave the palace to find Mark. Mira entered the hall quietly. Everyone turned to her. She looked at the maps, then spoke in a calm tone. If Mark returns, treat him with respect. If he does not return, we must find another way to show humans that we value peace. Several advisors nodded, impressed by her sudden seriousness. But one advisor whispered, "Maybe the human is stronger in mind than we realized." Mira turned away, but she heard the whisper clearly. She clenched her hands as she walked out. The comment made her feel uncertain. Outside the palace, the desert wind grew colder. Mark gathered dry sticks from around a rock formation. He arranged them in a small circle and sparked a fire using a metal ignition device from his belt. The fire was small but warm. Orange light danced across the sand, giving him some comfort. He sat near the flames, thinking about the mission and the insult he had received. He did not hate Princess Mira. In his experience, many proud leaders acted sharply to test others. But this time, something inside him knew the mission would fail if he stayed. Respect was the foundation of diplomacy. Without it, there could be no peace or cooperation. As night fully arrived, the sky filled with stars. They shined bright, almost too clear, since there were no clouds to cover them. Mark lay back on the sand, using his folded coat as a pillow. He looked up at the stars, trying to find familiar constellations from Earth. Some shapes matched, but others were different. He breathed out slowly and allowed sleep to take him. Back in the palace, Princess Mira could not sleep. She walked in her room from one corner to the other. She finally stepped out into the hallway and stopped at the balcony again. She looked out, hoping to see the fire from Mark's camp. After a long time, she noticed a tiny orange light in the distance. He survived, she whispered to herself. For reasons she could not explain, relief washed over her. She held the balcony railing tightly. Something about his calm strength pulled at her curiosity. The next morning, the desert sun rose early. Mark woke before sunrise, using the last bits of fire to warm himself. He stretched his arms and checked his water again. Only a little remained. He would need to find more soon. He stood up and began walking toward the east, hoping to find another settlement. Far behind him, several palace guards rode on hoverbikes across the sand. Princess Mira sent them secretly. She did not want anyone to know, so she gave orders quietly. The guards followed Mark at a safe distance. Their leader, a young guard named Aaron, respected the princess but wondered why she cared so much. "He walks like he knows the desert," one guard commented. Aaron nodded. "He is trained. Humans have survived dangerous worlds. Do not underestimate them." Mark noticed tracks behind him in the sand. He stopped and looked toward the palace direction. He saw dust clouds rising from engines. He sighed softly but did not run. Instead, he waited. When Aaron and his guards reached him, they turned off their engines. Aaron stepped down from his hoverbike and bowed slightly. "Princess Mira asks that you return," Aaron said. "She wishes to speak with you properly." Mark shook his head. "Respect cannot be commanded by regret," he replied. Aaron swallowed nervously. "I am ordered not to return without you." Mark looked at the horizon. He understood the situation. He did not want trouble for the guard. He placed his hands behind his back and breathed deeply. "I will return," he said finally. "Not for the princess, but because peace cannot be achieved from the desert." Aaron felt relief and nodded quickly. The guards made space for Mark on one hoverbike. Mark climbed on, holding the side rail as they rode back toward the tall palace towers. Inside, Princess Mira felt her heart jump when she heard the engines return. She walked to the front steps of the palace just as Mark stepped down. His clothes were dusty and his hair was messy, but his eyes remained calm. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words refused to come out. She had never apologized before. She did not know how to shape the words. Mark stood quietly, waiting. Finally, she said, "Your actions yesterday surprised me. I judged you too fast." Mark did not smile, but his eyes softened slightly. "You tested respect," he answered. "But respect must be returned as well." Mira nodded. Her pride wanted to argue, but her conscience stopped her. She looked at his dusty clothes and said, "You may enter the palace again. You will be given new clothes and rest." Mark stepped forward. The king arrived soon after, giving a small nod of approval. "Next time you face an insult," the king said, "you may answer with strength, but also patience." Mark nodded respectfully. "Strength without patience is only noise." The king smiled, impressed. Princess Mira stepped aside, letting Mark pass through the palace doors. As he walked inside, many guards bowed slightly. Their respect had grown. Inside her heart, Mira felt something new. Not anger, not pride. It was respect mixed with curiosity. She watched him disappear into the palace halls, knowing his story would shape her life in ways she could not yet understand. Mark sat inside a quiet guest room within the palace walls. The room had soft blue curtains and smooth white stone walls. It was simple compared to the grand throne hall, but it felt peaceful. A servant brought him new clothes made from light fabric, suitable for the warm weather. Mark thanked the servant with a polite nod and changed. He folded his dusty clothing neatly, even though many people would have thrown it aside. It was his habit to respect what he owned. After dressing, Mark walked to the palace training yard. He did not seek trouble. He only wanted to move his body after a night in the desert. Several Lurian guards practiced there, swinging glowing training spears that hummed with energy. They trained fast, moving in smooth steps. Their movement showed years of discipline. When they noticed Mark, they stopped. Some whispered, but Mark ignored the whispers and began his own routine. He moved forward and backward, practiced dodging motions, and stretched his arms. He imagined invisible opponents and countered quietly. His style was simple and precise. The guards watched with interest. They expected big, heavy movements from humans. Instead, Mark moved softly and smoothly. His training focused on balance and awareness. Suddenly, the crowd around the training yard grew when Princess Mira entered from the upper balcony. She watched silently as Mark continued his training. Her eyes studied the way he breathed calmly, the way his body flowed through movements without wasted energy. Something about the human style fascinated her. A guard named Ren stepped closer to Mark. Ren was tall, proud, and eager to show his skill. He tapped his spear twice on the ground before speaking. "You fight quietly, human," Ren said. "But can you defend against real steel?" Mark stopped and looked at him calmly. "Training is not a game," he replied. "I do not want to injure anyone," Ren smirked. "Do you think you can hurt us without armor?" Mark sighed softly. He did not want to make enemies, but refusing might appear as fear. He stepped into the training circle and raised his hands. "I will defend myself," he whispered. Ren attacked first, swinging the spear downward. Mark moved aside, grabbing the wooden handle and shifting his weight. Ren stumbled, surprised by the sudden force. Mark continued to avoid strikes instead of attacking. The crowd grew louder. Mira leaned forward on the railing, interested. Ren struck again. Mark stepped closer, turning the spear away gently and tapping Ren's shoulder. Ren froze. Everyone saw that Mark could have taken the spear and ended the fight. But he chose restraint. Ren lowered his weapon slowly and bowed his head. "Your control is strong," he muttered. Mark stepped back, bowing politely. "Thank you." A few guards clapped quietly. Mira's expression softened. For the first time, she respected his skill. Later that day, Mark was escorted to the dining hall. Long tables were filled with dishes from many worlds. Fruits that glowed faintly, breads that tasted sweet, and bowls of steaming broth. Lurans ate with chopsticks like tools, while humans used forks. Mark ate slowly, enjoying each bite. Mira entered the hall and sat near her father. She kept glancing toward Mark. The king noticed and spoke quietly to her. "You are curious," he said. "He is different," Mira answered softly. "He does not act like the reports say humans act." "Reports can be wrong," the king said with a slight smile. After dinner, the king invited Mark to walk with him in the palace garden. Trees with golden leaves grew around a rippling fountain. The scent in the air was fresh. Birds sang from branches overhead. The king spoke gently. "Tell me, Mark, why did you remove your armor?" Mark walked slowly beside him. "Armor protects the body, but pride should not protect the mind. When insulted, anger only brings more trouble. Walking away showed I did not need to prove anything." The king nodded. "You showed more honor than many warriors here." They walked past flowers that shined softly in the moonlight. The king continued, "Mira struggles with pride. She was raised to command respect. But she must learn that respect is earned, not forced." Mark responded, "Leadership requires listening. If she listens, she will grow." The king smiled kindly. "Perhaps your presence will teach her." Meanwhile, Princess Mira stood near a window overlooking the garden. She listened secretly to their conversation. Hearing Mark talk about leadership without insult surprised her. She expected anger, but instead he spoke calmly, her mind filled with thoughts she had never considered. The next morning, Mark was called to the defense chamber. Advisors argued loudly about pirate fleets attacking trade routes. A large holographic map displayed red blinking points across the border. Every voice wanted attention. Every advisor claimed their idea was best. Mark stood silently near the back. After an hour of shouting, he stepped forward. "May I speak?" he asked. At first, no one listened. When he spoke again, louder, they quieted. "You argue about reaction," Mark said. "But if you want safety, you must prevent attacks before they happen. Move patrols near the asteroid belt. Pirates use those shadows to hide. Cut their hiding places and they will flee." The room fell silent. Advisors studied the map. They realized Mark was right. Quickly, they started shifting patrol lines. The king nodded. Sometimes an outside view brings clarity. After the meeting, Mira approached Mark. She walked carefully as if weighing every word. "You speak with clear thought," she said. "How did you learn to plan like that?" Mark looked at her calmly. "Experience. Mistakes teach more than victories." Mira lowered her gaze. "I have made mistakes too," Mark replied gently. "Mistakes are not weakness. Refusing to learn is weakness." His words struck her like a gentle hammer. It did not hurt, but it reshaped her thinking. For the next several days, Mira watched how Mark worked with guards trained at dawn and helped servants without asking for reward. This challenged her assumptions. He spoke little, but when he spoke, his words had weight. One afternoon, a sudden alarm echoed through the palace hallways. Guards rushed past with weapons drawn. A message came from the outer wall. A scout patrol spotted pirate ships approaching the planet's atmosphere. The council gathered quickly. Advisors shouted orders. Mira froze for a moment, overwhelmed by noise. Mark stepped forward. "Calm," he ordered. "Fear brings mistakes." The king nodded. "Listen to him." Mark pointed to the map. "Pirates will strike at supply depots first. Move ships from the south where they are unguarded. Surround them before they land." Mira watched him amazed. He spoke confidently, but not arrogantly. His knowledge of battle was deep. Moments later, the enemy ships appeared in the sky like dark shadows. Explosions flashed across the horizon. The royal guard scrambled, but with Mark's plan, the defense held strong. The pirates found themselves trapped and retreated quickly. Inside the palace command center, cheers erupted. Advisors congratulated each other. Mira looked at Mark quietly, then approached him. "You saved many lives today," she said. "Your patience and knowledge made the difference." Mark answered, "I only did what was needed." Mira hesitated. She swallowed her pride. "I want to say, I am sorry for my words before." Mark looked at her gently. Growth begins when apology is spoken. Her heart warmed slightly. It felt strange to apologize, but also freeing. Later that night, Mira walked the garden alone. She replayed every moment with Mark in her thoughts. She realized she respected him deeply. Not because of his rank or armor, but because of his character. Mark sat near the fountain watching the calm water reflect the moonlight. When Mira approached, he nodded politely. "You see the world differently," she said. "You will too," Mark replied. "When you look through more eyes than your own." She sighed. "Perhaps I judged humanity too quickly." Mark smiled slightly. Just as many humans judge Lurians without knowing them. Mira sat beside him. Maybe peace begins when we stop judging. They sat quietly, listening to the water. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It felt peaceful. As the moon climbed high, Mira looked at Mark with a calm face. She no longer saw a weak human. She saw a strong, patient warrior. Inside her heart, respect began to grow into something deeper, something she could not yet understand fully. The desert wind blew softly across the palace garden. A new bond formed between two different hearts, and though neither spoke of it, both knew their story was only beginning. The next morning, the palace was unusually busy. Couriers rushed through the halls with urgent messages. The royal guard ran drills to stay alert, and advisors crowded the strategy chamber. Mark observed everything quietly, noting the energy and the tension. Despite the palace's usual grandeur, there was a sense of pressure in the air that reminded him of battlefields he had faced long ago. Princess Mira walked alongside him through the halls. She did not speak at first. Her eyes followed him as he moved calmly, examining the palace defenses, noticing every detail and quietly suggesting small improvements to guards along the way. His presence had a calm authority that seemed to ease even the most nervous soldiers. "Your attention to detail is impressive," Mira finally said. "Many here only follow orders. They do not think." Mark glanced at her without turning his head. "Preparedness prevents mistakes," he replied. "Any system can fail if people assume they are safe." Mira frowned slightly. She did not fully understand humans, but she could see that his words carried weight. Something inside her, a mixture of curiosity and respect, was growing. The morning passed in preparation for a routine inspection of the outer defenses. Mark followed the royal guard to the palace gates. From the high walls, he could see the desert stretching for miles. Dunes shifted gently under the wind and distant mountains shimmered in the heat. But Mark noticed small movement at the horizon, a faint dust cloud that suggested more activity than a normal desert day. He crouched and observed, pointing silently to a particular dune ridge. A group of scouts had likely been hiding there. Mira approached quietly and asked, "Do you think they are pirates?" Mark nodded slowly. "Possibly. Their movement is careful but coordinated. They are testing patrols. They want to see our reaction." The princess swallowed hard. She had grown confident in her palace walls, believing nothing could reach them easily. But Mark's sharp observation unsettled her. She realized the humans' ways of thinking about battle and strategy were different from her own people. They were practical, not proud. Mark moved toward the guards stationed on the walls. "Alert all patrols in a wider radius," he ordered. "Do not wait for them to come close. Move strategically, cut off paths, and watch for flanks. They will test weak points first." A young Lurian officer, hesitant at first, asked, "And if we strike too soon?" Mark looked him in the eye calmly. "Then we respond efficiently. Timing is everything. Too early or too late and we fail." Mira watched closely, amazed by how confidently Mark gave orders. His calm voice carried authority, but it did not command out of fear. Guards moved faster, following his plan. By afternoon, the palace was alive with quiet tension. Patrol ships hovered along the desert perimeter. Scouts moved carefully and soldiers checked weapons repeatedly. Meanwhile, Mark prepared the palace's internal defenses. He walked through supply rooms, armories, and communication stations, making small adjustments. His eyes missed nothing, and his mind calculated every possibility. Mira trailed behind him, unable to stop herself from observing every move. She noticed how Mark treated everyone with respect, never condescending, never angry. Even the lowest-ranked guard received a polite nod or quiet instruction. She began to understand that strength could exist without arrogance and respect could be earned without fear. Late in the afternoon, a scout returned with urgent news. "Pirates approaching the southern ridge," the scout shouted. "They move faster than predicted." Mark stepped forward. "They are testing again. Not attacking fully, only probing. Use the speed of our patrols to guide them into traps. Do not panic." Mira followed silently as Mark gave quick, clear instructions to the royal guard. Within minutes, patrols moved into position, covering all possible routes. The humans' calm decisiveness inspired confidence. Even hesitant guards moved with purpose. As the sun sank lower, small flashes appeared on the horizon. Dust rose in several locations, marking the positions of the pirates. Their ships were smaller than the palace fleet, but they were fast and clever. Mark adjusted the defense plan. Do not confront them directly yet. Lead them toward the traps. Watch their patterns. Respond only where necessary. Let their overconfidence work against them. Mira realized she had never seen a strategy like this. Her people often rushed into battle, relying on strength and weapons alone. Mark relied on patience and observation. He waited, watching every movement, predicting outcomes, and keeping his calm even as tension built. Night fell. The horizon glowed with the fires of pirate engines and the scattered lights of the palace defenses. Mark stood on the palace wall beside Mira. He pointed to a particular path where the enemy seemed most likely to move. Here, he said quietly, they will think this path is safe. They always test the weakest point first. We will meet them there with our strongest patrols. Mira nodded slowly. She felt the tension leave her chest slightly as she observed his careful planning. For the first time, she felt that the human's patience and thoughtfulness could match or even exceed the Lurian's raw strength. The first encounter came quietly. Small groups of pirates approached the traps Mark had set. Guards waited silently, following his instructions. The pirates moved quickly, but the strategy worked. They were caught off guard by the coordinated defense. Without heavy losses on either side, they retreated and scattered. Mira's eyes widened. She had expected loud combat, not a careful, efficient victory. Mark walked along the walls, checking positions and ensuring no one was left exposed. The pirates might return, but the palace had survived the first test without panic or confusion. That night, Mira invited Mark to speak privately in the palace council chamber. They sat at a long table surrounded by holographic maps. She looked at him seriously. You are not like any human I imagined, she said. You do not shout. You do not demand attention. Yet you inspire respect. Mark nodded calmly. Leadership is not about attention or pride. It is about preparation and protection. I value human lives and Lurian lives equally. Mira hesitated, trying to speak but unsure what to say. Finally, she asked, Did you ever doubt your choice to leave the desert yesterday? Mark looked thoughtful. No. Walking away showed more than staying in armor could have. Strength is measured by action and restraint, not pride. Mira absorbed his words silently. The lessons were clear, but they challenged her beliefs. She had always thought that respect came from fear, but Mark showed her that respect could come from honor, calmness, and patience. Days passed, and the palace remained alert. Mark continued training the guards, adjusting defense positions and quietly instructing patrols. Mira observed closely, often joining him during exercises. She noticed how he spoke to each soldier personally, listening to their concerns, and encouraging them to think for themselves. Slowly, she began to admire him, not for strength or armor, but for character and wisdom. His calm presence changed the energy around the palace. Even the most rigid guards began to relax slightly, working more efficiently and without fear. One evening, after a long day of drills, Mark sat quietly near the fountain in the garden. Mira approached and took a seat beside him. You taught our guards more in a few days than I thought possible, she said quietly, and yet you speak so little of yourself. Mark looked at the water, then back at her. I do not need to speak to prove my value. Actions speak louder than words. Mira studied him carefully. His quiet confidence made her feel both challenged and inspired. She realized she had misjudged humanity, and specifically, she had misjudged Mark. A faint wind stirred the golden leaves around them. The palace felt calm in that moment, but both knew danger could return at any time. Mark's methods had worked once, but vigilance was necessary. I will admit, Mira said after a long pause, I was wrong to mock you. Your patience and wisdom are unlike anything I expected. Mark inclined his head slightly. Acknowledging mistakes is the first step toward respect. The princess smiled faintly, not fully proud but humbled. She had learned something important. Respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. And in Mark she saw a strength far beyond armor or weapons. Above them, stars began to shine in the clear night sky. The desert beyond the palace wall stretched endlessly, quiet and vast. Mark and Mira sat together, listening to the gentle sound of water and wind. They did not need to speak. Silence now carried understanding, trust, and the quiet beginning of a bond that neither had expected. The next morning the palace woke to a bright sun. The golden light reflected off the crystal towers, bathing the gardens in warmth. Mark stood near the training yard, observing the guards as they prepared for patrol. His presence had already changed the energy of the palace. Soldiers moved confidently, speaking quietly to one another, following Mark's guidance and working as a team rather than acting individually. Princess Mira walked toward him. She had chosen to accompany him this morning, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to understand him better. Her purple eyes, calm yet curious, watched as he instructed the guards on careful movements, positioning, and observation techniques. "You are patient with them," Mira said softly. "Even when they hesitate, you do not scold or punish." Mark glanced at her. "Patience shows respect. Fear teaches obedience, not understanding. If the soldiers know why they will act correctly even without orders." Mira nodded thoughtfully. "I have learned much from you in these days. I did not expect that a human could change so much of what I believed." Mark smiled faintly. "Strength is not about size or armor. It is about awareness, thought, and action. You have courage, Princess. You just needed to see another perspective." For the rest of the morning, the two walked among the palace guards, adjusting their patrol paths, checking equipment, and discussing strategy. Soldiers began to see Mark as a teacher, someone who could guide them not through authority alone, but through knowledge and example. By mid-afternoon, a scout arrived with urgent news. A pirate fleet had been spotted at the outer desert ridge, larger than the one before. This was no small group. They were organized fast and heavily armed. Mark remained calm. He studied the map carefully, analyzing the terrain and calculating the positions where the pirates might strike. Mira watched closely, her heart beating faster than usual. This was a real test of everything they had practiced. "Do not rush," Mark said. "They will probe. Watch their patterns. Respond carefully. Overconfidence will lead them into mistakes." The palace guards moved efficiently. Patrols took position, guided by Mark's precise instructions. Mira felt a strange sense of calm watching them. The tension was high, but Mark's confidence spread to everyone around him. Even the youngest guards moved with purpose. As the sun lowered, the first ships of the pirate fleet appeared on the horizon. Their engines left long trails of dust across the desert. They were clever, moving as if testing for weaknesses. Mark signaled the palace fleet to hold fire. "Wait," he said. "Do not waste energy. Let them approach." Mira's brow furrowed. She had always been taught that action was necessary immediately. But she followed his judgment, trusting his calm authority. The pirates advanced, believing the palace was unprepared. Suddenly, coordinated patrols appeared on both flanks. Firepower from the palace fleet targeted the pirates' engines with precision, slowing their approach. The desert traps, carefully laid and coordinated by Mark, forced the pirates to retreat into disadvantageous positions. The battle was short but decisive. The pirates realized their attacks were ineffective and began to withdraw. The palace remained unharmed. Guards cheered quietly, but there was no reckless celebration. They had followed orders carefully, learned discipline, and survived without unnecessary risk. Mira watched silently as Mark walked among the soldiers, checking on them, encouraging them, and quietly correcting small mistakes. His calm presence and steady leadership had won the day without the need for loud commands or displays of power. After the battle, the palace council convened. Advisors praised Mark's planning and foresight. The king nodded proudly. "This human has shown wisdom and courage beyond what we expected. He saved lives without a single reckless action." Mira stepped forward, her expression serious but soft. She looked at Mark, who stood quietly near the center of the room. "I was wrong," she said. "I judged you unfairly before. You have earned respect not by force but by your actions and wisdom." Mark inclined his head respectfully. Respect must be given and received. "Today we learned together." The princess hesitated, then added, "I hope you will stay on our planet longer. There is much to learn from each other." Mark nodded. "I will stay as long as I am needed, not for glory, but to help keep your people safe." Days passed and life in the palace returned to a steady rhythm. Mark continued to train the guards, advise on defense, and assist in planning patrols. Princess Mira observed him closely, learning not only strategy but also humility, patience, and respect. One morning, she approached him in the training yard. "Mark, I have watched you carefully," she said. "Your methods are unusual for our people, but they work. You have changed the way I see leadership and strength." Mark looked at her calmly. "Strength is not what you show others. It is what you carry inside yourself. Pride alone does not protect people. Wisdom and patience do." Mira smiled faintly. I think I am beginning to understand. I will try to follow your example. He nodded once. Learning is a continuous journey. Leadership is not a title. It is an action. Later that day, Mark led a small patrol to inspect the outer desert. Mira accompanied him, wanting to observe how he worked outside the palace walls. They walked among the dunes, examining patrol points, checking for hidden threats and discussing possible improvements. Mark spoke quietly, teaching her how to observe the terrain. Notice subtle changes in sand patterns and anticipate movement. Mira listened carefully, absorbing every detail. You notice everything, she said. Even small details can make a difference. Observation prevents mistakes, he replied. Attention to small details can save lives. Mira nodded. She realized that the lessons went beyond battle. They applied to ruling a palace, understanding people, and making decisions with care. As the sun set, they returned to the palace. The sky glowed orange and pink over the desert. Mira paused to watch the horizon. She thought of how she had judged Mark harshly at first. Now she understood that his calm actions, quiet strength, and wisdom had changed her perspective entirely. That evening, the king called for a private audience with Mark and Mira. In the quiet throne room, he spoke with seriousness and pride. You both have learned from each other, he said. Mark has shown courage, patience, and wisdom. Mira has learned humility and respect. Together you demonstrate that strength is not only measured by weapons or armor, but by thought, action, and character. Mira looked at Mark, her eyes soft. I will do my best to honor your lessons, she said. Mark bowed slightly. And I will continue to serve in any way I can, princess, the king smiled. Then let this be the beginning of a strong bond between our people. The next days were peaceful. Mark continued his duties, but he also spent time teaching Mira about strategy, patience, and leadership. She grew more confident, learning to balance pride with wisdom, courage with patience, and authority with respect. One evening, Mira walked to the palace balcony, watching the desert. Mark joined her quietly. The wind carried the scent of sand and flowers from the gardens. Stars sparkled above them in the clear sky. You have changed my view of humans, she said softly. I used to think strength meant pride and power. Now I know it can mean patience, wisdom, and honor. Mark smiled faintly. You are wise enough to see that now. Not everyone can. Mira looked at him. I think we have both learned from each other. Mark nodded. Yes, and this is only the beginning. The princess felt a calm warmth in her chest. She realized that Mark had earned not only her respect but also her trust. Together, they had built a bond based on understanding, patience, and shared experience. From that night on, the palace felt different. Guards moved with confidence, advisors spoke thoughtfully, and the people whispered about the human soldier who taught their princess lessons in wisdom and patience. Mark and Mira continued to work together. The desert was no longer a place of danger but a place of learning and growth. Each day they faced new challenges, but their trust in each other and their respect for one another guided their actions. In the quiet moments, they would walk the palace gardens, watch the stars, and discuss strategy, philosophy, and leadership. The lessons they shared extended beyond the palace walls and into the hearts of those around them. Mark's presence had brought peace, respect, and understanding to the palace. Princess Mira had grown into a wiser leader, learning that strength and honor were not measured by loud displays, but by courage, patience, and the ability to act with thought and care. And so, the human soldier and the alien princess formed a bond that would be remembered for generations. They had faced insults, tested patience, and discovered that true respect is earned not through fear, but through wisdom and courage. The palace stood tall, the desert stretched beyond, and the stars above shone bright. Humanity and Lurea had learned that understanding and patience could overcome pride and arrogance. And in the calm of the palace garden, Mark and Mira walked side by side, knowing that together they had created a story of respect, courage, and trust that would last for many years.